Welcome to Capital TV, and today we have a very special guest that has visited Capital FM, and that is none other than Alan Quinlan, the rugby legend for the Island national team and for the Island nation as a whole. Welcome to Capital FM.
Thank you very much, Kenya. Alex. Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Karibu sana. First of all, the Kenyan tour. What has brought you here to Kenya? Your first time here in Kenya?
It's my first time in Kenya. I came with the Rugby Patrons Society to come out and do some coaching here and to do their Rugby Patrons Dinner tomorrow night, which generates some valuable funds for grassroots rugby. Obviously, I'm a rugby man. I've played rugby all my life since I was a very, very young child. And I was very lucky to be a professional rugby player for 15 years with Munster and Ireland. So I had a really good, successful career, some difficult injuries throughout my rugby career, but I was very lucky. I played my first professional game in 1996, which is a long time ago. Rugby just went professional, and then I signed my first contract in 1997, and I retired in 2011. So I was part of a really good transition from amateur into professional rugby. So when the Rugby Patrons Society asked me to come out and get involved in their program of fundraising grassroots rugby, I was really delighted to do that. So that's why I'm here.
Speaking of grassroots football, grassroots rugby, it's very important because that's where the development of rugby starts. As far as you've been in Kenya, where can you rate us and what should we do for us to be a rugby nation, compare it with even South Africa here?
It's tricky because Kenya would be a smaller nation as regarding 15 man's rugby. I watch the Rugby Sevens and I see the Rugby Kenyan Sevens team, and they're outstanding. They've taken they've grabbed the attention of the world because you know how good they've been, how competitive they are, the way they play the game, the way they run freely with the ball. So that's been a real positive for Kenya. I think 15s rugby is a challenge for any team because sevens is much easier. You don't have the scrum and the line out, and you can just go out and throw the ball around. Of course you need skills for it, but 15s you have the scrum, the line out, so you have the challenge with rugby is a physical game. So you mentioned South Africa. When Ireland plays South Africa, we're playing really big, strong men who in the forwards who can physically dominate you. So you have to find ways of evolving and matching their physicality. So I think for Kenya, and I was part of this development in Ireland, like I said, since 1996, 97, when Ireland wasn't really renowned for beating the big nations and winning lots of things. Of course, we have a lot of big wins in our history in the old Five Nations. But I think part of our development and part of our success now, because rugby in Ireland is really strong. We have Munster who've won the European Cup 2 times. Leinster, our provincial team, have won it 3 times. We won the Grand Slam in 2009. We beat New Zealand last year in Chicago. We've beaten South Africa, Australia. So we beat them regularly now. We've lots of players on the British and Irish lines that went to New Zealand. So that's a big coup for us in Ireland because we are a small nation. We've only 4.5 million people. Rugby is not our national sport. Hurling and football, in the GAA it's called, it's our Gaelic games. It's our traditional games. They're the #1 sport. So I've seen a development and a program there. And what I think about any country who's trying to develop in 15s is you've got to work with the young kids. And you've got to work with the young coaches as well. So if you coach the kids in the right way, they will learn new skills and understand the game better. If the coaches are teaching them the right things, they will gradually get better and they will start learning themselves. And then sometimes when the good young players pick up the skill quicker, like at the breakdown when you have to go in and clean out the ruck, or at the scrum time or in the line out, they will start coaching the other kids. So I think for Kenya, if they want to, you know, I think there is an ambition to get stronger. People love their rugby here. That's what I've really noticed since I've arrived. It's to work more with the development of the young kids and make sure that the skills that they're being taught are the right ones. So that is the way forward for any smaller nation in 15s rugby, that if you want to develop to get out into the rural parts of, we did it in Ireland, even though it's much smaller, but in Kenya as well, and try and find guys who have that ambition to want to play rugby and want to learn. And then if you develop a program where the coaches learn the skills and continuously upskill, because the game changes and little techniques always happen. That's in football, it's a round ball, you kick it around the field and you don't have to, you know. But I think in rugby, the skill set, and there's often new rules and regulations, and whether it be tackling technique or whatever. So I think it's important that the coaches in Kenya understand and are teaching the kids the right techniques.
Is it possible for a rugby, a sevens player who's used to play for sevens players, especially in Kenya, we're very good at sevens, to transit also as players, be very good at the 15s? Because we've seen South Africa, South Africa, taking a break to go and play in their 15s. Is it possible also for the Kenyans guy? And what should a player need to be good at both? Because 15s, as I understand, is the biggest game of rugby. It's the main rugby. Then sevens comes in.
Well, sevens is on the global circuit, so in some ways sevens is a very lucrative, possibly lucrative, attractive sport to watch, because you can hit all the markets around the world, travel everywhere, where sometimes the rugby is 15s is just different pockets around the world. I think for a sevens player to transition, it can be a little bit more difficult mainly because of the scrum, the line out and the ruck. It's easier for the backs, so the fast guys, and most of the Kenyan sevens players are really evasive and very quick and very skillful. So these guys can become backs in the 15 game very easily. Again, it's down to the skill set, and so I think it is a transition that can be made, and we've seen in the UK and Ireland and in Australia, New Zealand, lots of guys have come from the sevens, and in South Africa, and played 15s as well.
For the 15s, I know you have the experience having played for the World Cup, which is the prestigious tournament that anybody, any rugby player that will want to play, the height. The Kenyan team is yet to play in a World Cup. We came very close in 2014, but we did not make it by a single point. This time around, we are another journey where we're going to battle it out at the qualifiers this year, 2019 in Japan. Maybe do you think that Kenya has the quality to finally make history and qualify for World Cup for the first time ever?
Yeah, I think so. And again, it's between now and then is developing a game plan, a belief and a confidence, and sometimes you need a little bit of luck. I played against Namibia, who Kenya will come up against.
It has been a stumbling block for us.
Yeah, I played against them in 2003 World Cup in Australia. And I played them in 2007 in France. And traditionally, they don't have a huge rugby population, but they're similar to the South Africans. They can get some quite big, strong guys. You play Morocco, Tunisia, Uganda. So there's no reason why they can't. I think it would be fantastic. And I think that's what the world game needs, is smaller nations, who are now smaller nations, and we want to increase the number of quality international teams throughout the world. That is one of the motives of World Rugby, and offer more support. So I think World Rugby need to support teams like Kenya and the rest of the smaller nations to be able to, but it would be a dream come true. But it's a tricky one. It's a tough one. They have, they will have a number of games to play. But I think it'd be wonderful if Kenya. I played at a World Cup, and it is a dream come true for players to I played at 3 World Cups to get to a World Cup. So I would love to see Kenya get to a World Cup.
What's the feeling of playing in a World Cup as a player? What is that feeling that a rugby player that thinks that I have achieved now in playing for the World Cup?
Rugby is, and I think since it's gone professional, there's a lot of pressure. So in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, it's week on week. You play big matches in Europe, in your domestic league. Then you play for your country in the Six Nations, and then you play touring teams in the summer. The World Cup is unique because it's every 4 years. So it's a build-up. And maybe 2 years out, you think, I want to be there. Who's my competition? Who's going to try and take my place? Who am I up against for selection? What do I need to do? You make all these sacrifices, and then when you finally hear your name being called out off the list, it's a wonderful experience. So for me to be at a World Cup, and for any player, it's the pinnacle. It's right up there with anything you can achieve, because it's a unique thing that happens every 4 years, and you're playing everyone throughout the world.
Maybe in terms of preparations, as a team that wants to go and qualify for a very major tournament, what do they need to do for them maybe to succeed? Because now at the moment Kenya is preparing to go for those qualifiers. Maybe what should they do that other teams do for them to be ready for those qualifiers?
Well, I think if I was involved in a Kenyan team trying to qualify, I would do a lot of analysis on the other teams. I would try and watch the best teams in the world and see what they do well, and try and translate that back into to try and find some little things that they can make better and do better between now and the qualifiers. And for the players, I think, and just going back on that point, if you watch New Zealand play, the Kenyan team can't be like New Zealand, but they can watch and maybe learn about the technique of the breakdown, when they should have given a pass, when they should have kicked, and see some stuff like that. So I think the individual players, I mentioned the word sacrifice. In any walk of life, in sport, in business, in anything, sacrifice is important. If you work hard at something and you want it enough, you've got to make sacrifices. So between now and the qualifiers, the group of players, if they really have that desire and commitment to try and go to a World Cup, they've got to make those sacrifices by training harder, by watching their diet, by watching their alcohol intake, and trying to make themselves better every time they go on the rugby field. And that is the standard of the top players in the world. So it's difficult for maybe some of the Kenyan players to understand, because it's evolving. It's something that they're trying to develop, the 15-man's game, and get better. They want to play in the big tournaments. But if you look at someone like the top players, Paul O'Connell in Ireland, he was captain of British, Brian O'Driscoll, these world-class players, from an Irish point of view, of course, there's many world-class players. These guys, even though they were probably the best players in the world in their position for a long period of time, they continuously went out and trained hard. Did the small details, stayed on 10 minutes after training to work on maybe some tackle technique, or to work on some passing if they made a mistake in training, to continuously watching videos and pushing themselves in the fitness. And that's what I love, being part of a group like that, and we had a very successful period throughout my career. I was very lucky I was involved in a good generation of players. So they've got to motivate each other and make sacrifices, I would say.
And maybe 2019 World Cup, maybe any surprises that we'll see there in Japan or New Zealand continue dominating? What do you prediction?
Well, I would like to think Ireland could have a good chance, because genuinely, we are developing a lot of really good, exciting players at the moment. 2 years ago, we went through a period where I thought that we were maybe on a downward curve for a little bit, but in the last 2 seasons, I just see a lot of younger players coming through, good excitement. We have a world-class coach in Joe Schmidt, the New Zealander. So we've beaten New Zealand for the first time, which is a big thing, mentally as well. So I think Ireland will have a good chance. We've never gone past the quarterfinals in the World Cup, which is a big disappointment. We've never been to a semi-final. And many times we were predicted to maybe go to a semi-final. So I think the usual traditional part, New Zealand would be favourites. South Africa are not going that good at the moment. But they should, Rassie Erasmus has left Munster to go back there, and I think they could be very strong. Australia is not going that good either. But I think the other big one, and it pains me to say it, but the English could be very strong, because they're one of our biggest rivals. But they have a lot of good structures in place. They have a lot of money. They can put money into the structures of the game. They have a big pool of players, and they have a really good coach under Eddie Jones at the moment. So I think New Zealand, England and Ireland, those three will be contesting, and Australia, South Africa, Scotland, Wales could be contending as well.
Your best moments in rugby?
My best moment was, it was best and worst moment as well, because I scored a really important try for Ireland against Argentina in the 2003 World Cup. It was a game we had to win to make the quarterfinals. In 1999, Argentina knocked us out, so it was a bit of a revenge match, and I think the pressure was on us to make a quarterfinals at least, and we beat them. I scored a try in that match, but I dislocated my shoulder in scoring the try. So it was a wonderful moment for about 2 seconds, and then the pain started, and then I had to go off, and my World Cup was over. So it was my best moment and worst moment all in one.
But finally, what's your message? What's your word to the Kenyan rugby players, both who are coming up and the senior players as well? Maybe your advice for them to be a world-class player, to be professional players.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story, Alex. In 1997, I was starting out in my career, and I sat in a room with a group of people and a new coach. We were going into the unknown of professional rugby, and we were starting out in the European competition. So we sat in that room with very little expectation of ourselves. We didn't believe that we could win, that we could be successful, that we could be champions of Europe, which was a big thing because a lot of big clubs in France and the UK, and to win a European competition is a massive thing. So we had a coach that day who told us in 1997, and I remember the conversation well, he told us that one day we will be champions of Europe, one day we will be the best players individually and collectively. And for a few moments we thought this guy was crazy because we didn't see ourselves as winners. We didn't, but then that mentality started to grow in our minds. We started to train hard. We started to ask questions. We wanted to get better, and we self-motivated as a group of players. And that coach facilitated us. So it took us 9 years to stand on the podium in 2006 in Cardiff in front of 85,000 people, 30,000 people outside the stadium, 25,000 people on the streets in Limerick, 25,000 people on the streets in Cork, and probably every household in the country watching in the UK and Ireland. So it took us 9 years to stand on that podium and lift that European trophy. And there was a lot of disappointment and upset and heartache because we lost 2 finals, a number of semi-finals. But that would not have happened unless we changed our mentality. So sometimes we can see the negative and say, well, we shouldn't be at a World Cup, as a Kenyan rugby player saying, well, we're not good enough, and why we're not going to be as good as any of the other teams. But if you believe, see it, believe it, achieve it, and if you have that mentality, it may not guarantee you the result, but what it will do is will give you a chance. And if that's all you want is a chance. So if you have every player saying, okay, let's be realistic here, we're not going to go and win a World Cup, but if we want to get to a World Cup, we've got to work incredibly hard. And there's a great kind of feeling in working hard as well, and then giving it your best shot. If it doesn't work out, so be it, you go again. So that's my advice to anyone in sport, is you've got to make that sacrifice, and you've got to be committed and have the desire and the passion and belief that you can do it. Why not? If you put up the barriers yourself, it's going to be very difficult. Like I said, it doesn't guarantee you the result, but you've got to give it everything.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Alex.
And,
my pleasure.
Visiting Kenya. Enjoy.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, that was Alan Quinlan saying that commitment, passion, and what the hard work will make you a better rugby player or a sportsman player. So, see you next time here at Capital TV.